Well, it feels like we never talk enough about governance issues. I introduced some in the last part of the Planet Remade book, but here it is from this book, a little bit more specific. It's called Solar Radiation Management and the Governance of Hubris. Well, is solar radiation management really a governance issue, or is it just governance of human pride and confidence in its ability to do such large-scale experiments? I'm just going to pick a few points. This is a few governance challenges of solar radiation management. How can international agreement over the ideal global climate be reached? We talked about this in terms of who has the hand on the thermostat if we decide that we're going to limit the warming to certain level, 2 degrees, 1.5 degrees or whatever, because that's kind of a global mean temperature. It doesn't tell you exactly what it will be in your backyard, so there's a lot of details there that has to be decided, Who should decide, and on the basis of what criteria, where and when SRM field experiments and deployment should occur? Is it possible to come to such a decision democratically? It's possible because IPCC's running, Paris Agreement and so on are now more democratic in terms of bottom-up submissions of nationally determined contributions. There is, of course, monitoring, verification and reporting phases that still haven't been put through the tests. Can legitimate collective and democratic control over SRM deployment that some might seek to do unilaterally be established? So can rogue countries go off and do something, or is there some kind of a governance that can be established? Will SRM catalyze or require autocratic forms of governance? Will it be like a top-down global level mandate that will be imposed? Can governance processes be developed, evolved and accommodated within existing democratic governance structures, including legal constructs on a national and international scale? Yet to be seen. Could SRM lead to transforming risk to the poorest countries and the most vulnerable people? So is it about protecting the rich and then abandoning the poor and vulnerable, or is it going to be better than that? How would liability and compensation for adverse impacts, including on a transnational and intergenerational scale, be handled? Intergenerational, so what you may leave as a legacy for the future as a negative impact. How would contested views concerning complex attribution of weather events to natural variations or SRM be handled and resolved? So once you do SRM, having set up some governance, there are changes in extreme events, rainfall distributions and so on. Then how do you separate the natural impacts when they are, especially when they are adverse, and what are caused by the SRM that was agreed upon, right? Can and should intent and motivation for SRM, which will always be plural, ever be governed, and if so, how and by whom, and to what ends, right? So this is kind of normative questions, but here are some normative principles for governing geoengineering research. Social scientists love normative questions, normative principles, norms and punishments, especially when it comes to managing common goods like the atmosphere, planet, Earth's climate, ocean, land, etc. And Nobel laureate like Eleanor Ostrom worked a lot on this, and she's written good books on that as well. Oxford Principles. So these are based on names where meetings happened and documents were produced. Oxford Principles for Governing Geoengineering Research. Geoengineering to be regulated as a public good. So it's a shared resource. Public participation in geoengineering decision making. Disclosure of geoengineering research and open publication of results. Independent assessment of impacts. Governance before deployment. The Asilomar Principle for Responsible Conduct of Climate Engineering Research. That's a place in California, I think. Anyway, 2010 there was a conference where the Asilomar Principles propose the need for international governance and suggest several elements important to governance: collective benefit, establishing responsibility and liability, open and cooperative research, iterative evaluation and assessment, public involvement and consent. So you know what the basic normative principles are. Implementations are key, of course. Bipartisan policy center principles for climate remediation research. Purpose should be to protect the public and environment from potential impacts of climate change and climate remediation technologies. So we are now talking broader than just solar radiation management. Field deployment inappropriate at this time. Okay, decided. Basis and direction of research based on independent advice from experts and government officials, informed by a robust process of public engagement, transparency, international coordination, and ongoing assessment and adaptive management. So this is assuming that remediation is going to go on. Okay. Then finally, looking at perceived conditions and plausibilities for solar radiation management. Scientific robustness. There is confidence in the science of climate change as a reliable basis for policy. We know that. Only if people believe in the ability and authority of climate science to predict with confidence can policies aimed at climate remediation gain traction. Low plausibility. This confidence was rarely held by participants at this meeting. Accurate research foreseeability. Confidence in the ability of research to anticipate reliably the side effects of SRM in advance of deployment. Low plausibility. There was little belief in the capacity of science to identify side effects reliably in advance. Perceptions of messing with nature were seen as inevitably leading to nasty surprises. We would be living the global experiment, which will become part of human condition. So once you set it off, you are in a new world, brave new world, if you will. Condition of the ability of research to demonstrate efficacy. Participants registered considerable doubt about technical feasibility of SRM. Only on deployment could efficacy be really ascertained. Under COVID now you have this kind of experiment going on where vaccines are being given to literally billions of people across the world, and there were tests done prior by various vaccines that are being given about efficacy, but real efficacy is only known after it's been given in the real world and people go about their lives to see how COVID will behave or what kind of protection is given by the vaccine, for example, vaccines. Condition of good intent and effective governance. Confidence of the motivation of SRM as being complementary to adaptation and mitigation. Confidence that SRM will be used exclusively by governments with the motivation to counteract anthropogenic climate change. Low plausibility. Good intentions could never be guaranteed, being potentially open to dual use. Used to further national, regional, or commercial interests at odds with the purpose of counteracting climate change. This is along the lines of what we saw from Alan Robock's 20 points of why geoengineering is a bad idea. So essentially commercialization of technology, military use, dual use, etc. Cannot be guaranteed a priori. Condition of democracy. Confidence in the capacity of existing political systems to accommodate solar radiation management. Low plausibility. Global governance intensely difficult to achieve within democratic political arrangements with current omens. Example, lack of consensus on mitigating climate change. Being poor with SRM and with SRM only being governable under autocratic governance arrangements. So there are many such ideas where the global governance issues of geoengineering, especially here solar radiation management, are yet to be agreed upon, but already centers like governance of geoengineering are being set up, where obviously the thought process will start, and just like the negotiations under UNFCCC evolved over time, and unfortunately haven't managed to change the trajectory of emissions yet, despite a lot of agreements. This is still to grow, and we will see how it evolves and what will be possible given the science, and how science will be used to justify the various actions and governance, and how agreements at global level can be made. Right?